So in Narada Bhakti Sutra, we have completed till Sutra 5 last time. Sutra 5, we'll go to Sutra 4 and 5 just to get the flow. What happens when one gains this bhakti? So we started with Narada. Narada Rishi is going to speak about bhakti. What is this bhakti? Parama prema rupa. It is of that prema rupa. So it's that supreme devotion, amrita swarupa, and it's of the nature of immortality, right? Because when we fully engage in this bhakti, we realize our immortal self. And this bhakti is also a relationship with that which is immortal. Then in Sutra 4 and 5, we saw what happens when one engages in the supreme devotion. What happens is the devotee becomes very content. So experiences contentment. That we saw in Sutra number 4. What is the nature of that contentment? Sutra number 5. When one achieves this bhakti, then they don't desire for anything anymore, or they don't feel sad, they don't have hatred, and they don't dwell or revel in the world, and they're not enthusiastic about anything. So does this mean that they're like a stone? No, actually they have full love for that divine. It's just that all these emotions for the world have dropped off. So now today we'll start from Sutra 6. I'll read and then you can follow. Yajñātva matto bhavati stabdho bhavati Atmaramo bhavati yajñātva matto bhavati, upon knowing which. Matto bhavati means that bhakta, that devotee, becomes intoxicated. Stabdho bhavati means stabdha means that bhakta becomes peaceful and silent. Atmaramo bhavati, that bhakta becomes united with the self. So what does this mean? In our scriptures, we see these words like that the self is the nature of rasa, of ananda, of madhu, of honey. And we see in the poems of the Sufis that the self is like it. Realizing the self, reveling the self is like wine, So what is this state of intoxication? This intoxication of a bhakta is very, very different. What happens when one is intoxicated? They enter a completely different realm. What they see, we cannot see. And what we see, they cannot see. There's no entry. They're thinking, they're seeing something else. They're completely out of it. And they have no entry to this world of ours. And we have no entry to their world. So they seem to be in a different space. And we can see that in the lives of bhaktas like Mirabai, right? For Mirabai, there's so many interesting stories about her life. And through the Bhakti Sutras, we'll go into a few incidents of all the bhaktas' lives. But there was one particular which was very stunning. Mirabai used to lose herself in singing and dancing for Sri Krishna. When she was a young girl, she was given this idol statue of Sri Krishna. And she just took to it. She would clean it, bathe it, dress it, decorate it. And she would say, this is my Govardhana Giridhara. This is my Sri Krishna. And when her mother, one day when she was watching a procession and she saw a bride and groom, she asked her mother, what is that? And her mother said, that's a bride and a groom. And so she asked her mother, who's my groom? And her mother said, Shri Krishna is your groom. And she took that to heart. And she made Shri Krishna really like her groom, like her beloved. And so she would dance and sing with her gungrus, and she had her ekatara, and everybody would just flock to hear her sing because they felt that she was graced with Lord Krishna. And in her dance, she would lose herself in ecstasy. She wouldn't know what's happening in this world. And later on, after she got married, her husband had built a nice temple for her. And she would go to that temple and she would sing. And at that time, it is said that Akbar himself, this Mughal emperor, Akbar, he heard about her praises from Tansen. Tansen used to be one of the singers in the court, king's court. So Tansen was a divine singer. So he used to praise Mirabai and say that she is really graced with this divinity. And so Akbar wanted to meet her. But now how will Akbar go and meet her? How will the Mughal emperor meet a Rajput? Rajputs are against the Mughals. So they actually dressed up as sadhus. Akbar and Tansen actually dressed up as sadhus to go to Mira because Akbar had heard so much about her. And when he went to Mira's the place where Mira was singing, he just got lost. He couldn't believe how divine her singing was. And he told Tansen, I just want to go and touch her feet and offer a garland, for Sri Krishna. And Tansen was telling him, be careful, what if we get noticed? He said, no, we won't get noticed. And so it is said that Akbar went actually because he wanted to just touch the feet of Mira and seek her blessing. And then he gave to her this, this har, this mala made of gems. And she said, I cannot take it. Everything is to Sri Krishna. He said, no, I brought it for Sri Krishna. You please offer it. And so he gave the garland to her and she offered it to Sri Krishna and he left. So this divine was Mirabai singing. And this was her speciality, that whenever she sang, whoever was around her, she took them to the highest realms where they forgot themselves. This is called Mattaha Bhavati. She was high on God. This is what happens to bhaktas. And Stabdaha Bhavati also, after that they take themselves to such a high level, they just fall silent. They just fall silent, that they cannot speak anymore, because what is there to say? And who is there to say and to whom to say? Everything just merges into that one. So Stabdaha Bhavati. And Atma Ramo Bhavati. Atma Rama means they revel. Ram means to revel. They revel in that alone. So their minds don't go to the world. Their minds don't go to these objects, these material things of the world. They just stay in that divinity. This is the nature of supreme bhakti. This is how our bhaktas are. Now, one might ask, now how does one get there? How does one get to this level of supreme bhakti, which is so beautiful in its own right? So now these next set of verses tell us what we have to do to get there, or what the bhaktas did to get to that level. These are from Sutras 7 to 14. So Sutra 7, Sana, Sana, Kamayamana, Kamayamana, Nirodharupatvat, nirodharupatvat sana kamayamana nirodharupatvat. Sa, that bhakti, na kamayamana, there's no element of desire in the world for it. Nirodharupatvat, it is of the nature of renunciation. So whenever we hear this word renunciation, we kind of feel like very just like we're allergic to it. You know, when people say tyaga, you know, vairagya, we feel like allergic to it. And this, but what is this renunciation with bhakti? And this is also the renunciation in jnana. It's not giving up, it's growing up. Now, this has to be understood clearly. Our scriptures don't tell us to give up out of force. They tell us to grow up out of maturity. So it is like this, where, for example, you just bought a new iPhone. Say you just bought a new iPhone something 14, and it has new cameras. It has, it's crash proof. I don't know if it's crash proof, but it's crash proof. It's waterproof. All of these things. You just bought this new phone. What happens is we start to get attached to it. We start to fancy it. Let's buy a cover for it. Let's get insurance for it. And our whole mind is in this phone. And then someone, let's say our sibling, younger or older, they look at our new phone and they say, oh, this is such a great phone, but you have two phones. So we have two phones. Let's say you have two phones. And your sibling says, can you please give me your phone? And what is our response? Are you kidding me? Like, why would I give you my new phone? I would never do that. But what happens 2 years, 3 years later? After using the phone and going through all of those emotions, you're ready to give it up. Even if they don't ask for it, you're ready to give it up. You're like, now you can have the phone. I don't need it anymore. I don't want it anymore. You can have the phone. And so the first instance when your sibling was asking for the phone, you didn't want to give it up, right? Because there's still some attachment towards it. But 2 or 3 years later, after using that phone thoroughly, now one is ready to grow out of it. I don't need it anymore. You take it. And hopefully that mind has moved on to something else. Maybe I can get a simpler phone, or I already have another phone. I'm fine. So this nirodha, this renunciation is of that out of maturity, out of experiencing the world, we kind of fall out of it. We fall out of it. And therefore, there's no trouble, there's no repercussion. When we give up something out of force, what happens is we still think about it. Should I have given it up? You know, life is really like wasted without it. I don't like life anymore. We have all these thoughts when we give up something out of force. And we become very sad. But when we grow out of something, out of maturity, we feel so much peace and a sense of ease. And this is that renunciation. Nirodha rupatvat. That I've gone through all of these motions of trying to seek in the world, and it's just not working. So now I willingly let it go. Now, what does one let go? What does one let go of? You're saying let go of the world. But what of the world do we let go? So now in Sutra 8 explains, Nirodhastu lokaveda vyaparanyasaha lokaveda vyaparanyasaha Nirodhastu lokaveda vyaparanyasaha. So what do we give up? Nirodha means to give up, but give up here, grow out of it. What do we grow out of? It says here, loka, secular, Veda, religious, vyapara. Grow out of secular and religious activities. That is nyasa, that is renunciation. So when we look at this, we're kind of stuck. Grow out of worldly, secular, and religious activities. What does this mean? So those worldly activities which are not conducive to the path of devotion, slowly grow out of it, grow out of it. And we only are able to grow out of it when we hold on to something higher, right? So keep holding on to that something higher. Last time when we talked about bhakti, we talked about how we cannot force bhakti. We cannot force love for God. If I don't feel love for God, I can't force it. And that's okay. But when we listen, when we hear, when we read, then that heart has the capacity to melt. And so hold on to something higher. So in the world, all of those worldly things are driven away. And we're just solely focused on that divinity. Okay, worldly things, grow out of those that are not conducive to bhakti. But Vedic things, what does that mean? That means that we actually misuse our scriptures. Many times we pray to God. But what do we do when we pray to God? We pray to God for the world, isn't it? We go to the temple, we go to the mandir, and what do? We say, Bhagavan, please give us wealth. Right now, I'm struggling, please give us wealth. Or Bhagavan, please help my family be okay with me. Right now, I'm going through something with my family. Please help them be okay with me. Or Bhagavan, I'm going through some health issues. Please, please cure me. So we go to God and we use God to get the world. We pray to God, Bhagavan, Goddess, who has the potential to give us that which is so priceless, liberation. We go to God and we say, give me the world. This is what we do. And then not only that, but we use the world to get to God. So we use the world, our life, our family, our career, our social activities. We use all of these things, hoping we'll find God in that. But we don't. So when it says you give up also these Vedic, vyapara, religious activities, it means those religious activities where we're using God to get to the world, or we're using the world to get to God. That also should be let go of. A true bhakta or devotee is one who's able to look into God's eyes and ask for God. That's called bhakta. When you can look into God's eyes and say, I only want you, nothing else. This is what happened with Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda ji's family was going through poverty. And so he approached Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He said, you please pray for me. You are very close to Kali Mata. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was a total devotee of Kali Mata. Swami Vivekananda said, you pray for me. And Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, you go and ask Kali yourself to relieve your family of this poverty. So Swami Vivekananda went to the mandir. And what happened? He looked at Kali Mata. He looked at her, he forgot all of his problems, and he just asked for dispassion. Please give me this passion. He went to Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, and Sri Ramakrishna said, did you ask? He said, I forgot to ask. And Sri Ramakrishna said, go again. Swami Vivekananda went again. He looked at Kali Mata. What did he ask? He asked for devotion. He asked for bhakti. He came out, and Sri Ramakrishna said, did you ask? He said, I forgot. But go again. And even in the third time, he asked only for knowledge. He could not ask to relieve his family of poverty. He could not ask to secure his family. And he went to Sri Ramakrishna and said, I really couldn't ask. And Sri Ramakrishna said, you don't worry. I will pray for you and your family will be taken care of. That was Swami Vivekananda's bhakti. They always say that outside he was all jnana, but inside his heart was very, very soft. When he was face to face with God, Goddess, he couldn't ask for anything else. So the nature of this nyasa is that we grow out of these activities which are not conducive to our devotion to Bhagavan, and we grow out of even these scriptural activities, because the Vedas has all these, if you want wealth, you do this yaga. If you want health, you do this yaga. Grow out of these and just ask God for God. Then, what does he say after this? He says, not only that, but also practice this ananyata. So what is this ananyata? Sutra 9. Tasmin ananyata tadvirodishu udasinata cha. Tasmin ananyata tadvirodishu udasinata. Tasmin, in that Lord, ananyata, single-minded devotion, means no other. Tadvirodishu, and those that are opposite to it, udasinata, there is indifference. Cha. So again, continuing this nature of renunciation, he says ananyata. Anya means other, ananyata means there is no other. So there is no other refuge but that God or Goddess. There's no other refuge but Bhagavan. In fact, there is no other being but Bhagavan, right? And in fact, Bhagavan is none other than me. So there's no other refuge but Bhagavan. In fact, there's no other being but Bhagavan. And in fact, I am not different from that Bhagavan. Ananyata, single pointedness. And so one's mind gets totally merged into that, seeing that divinity everywhere, and that which is not sort of conducive again to that divinity, that virodishu, that which is not conducive to that, udasinata. Udasinata means indifference. Now, whenever we hear this word indifference, especially in Vedanta, we tend to feel like that person doesn't care, right? Udasinata, that person just doesn't care. There's so many things happening in the world. There's wars going on, And you have this bhakta singing kirtan and praying to God. How insensitive, right? Some people can think, why aren't they doing anything about it? So what does udasina mean? It means ut asina, one who is seated above. Ut asina, one who is seated above. Udasina means not that the person doesn't care, but it's just that the mind doesn't go there. The mind of the bhakta doesn't go towards the world. The mind just goes to Bhagavan. And even by them sitting down and singing bhajans and singing kirtans, they are also subtly changing the vibrations of themselves and the people around them. It's not that they're not doing anything. There's such a beauty in what they do because they create this peace, this serenity, this environment around them so that people's minds and hearts are uplifted and they don't think about doing negative things or bad things. So they might not be these bhakta, these karma yogis out in the field and serving and doing. That's also required. That's definitely also required. They might not be doing that, but that doesn't mean that they don't care. It's just that their minds are in a higher place, and through their own kirtans, through their own bhajans, through their own prayers, they are also working for the welfare of the world, but in their own way. So this udasinata means that they are seated higher. Those things which are not, those things which are not conducive to their bhakti, means the way that they want to worship, the way that they worship God, those things that are not conducive to it, they sit above it. They sit above it and they still worship. They still pray and they still care. So not that they're totally heartless, they're actually full of love. So this much, more there is, more we will take up next time, but this is the nature of renunciation. So what have we seen? That nirodha, the nature of this nirodha or renunciation in bhakti, point number one, is that it's not giving up. It's growing up. It's growing out of those things which still bind us and tie us down. And what do we have to grow out of? These worldly bonds and ties which are not conducive to our bhakti, and also our method of prayer or communion with God where we are asking God for the world. That's not conducive to our bhakti, right? And then point number three, that nature of that tyaga or renunciation means actually there is no other. There's only that Bhagavan. That Bhagavan is my only shelter. And anything that's conducive to this, then that bhakta sits higher, is seated above it. Okay, so we will stop here.